Good evening, I'm Grace Brown in Hong Kong and welcome to View TV News. Coming up on tonight's show. Carrie Lam backs the move to bar Democrat Lau Siu Lai from running in the West Kowloon by-election. The chief executive once again defends her controversial Lantau development project, saying action needs to be taken to solve the city's housing crisis. And Lion Rock Park reopens after a dengue fever scare. Thank you for joining us. We begin tonight with the political storm that's been brewing over the West Kowloon Ledgeco by-election. Chief Executive Carrie Lam has come out in support of the decision to ban Labour Party's Lau Siu Lai from running this November. Lau was notified last night in a move that's been widely criticised by the pan-democratic camp. Dhruv Tikekar begins our coverage tonight.
The Kowloon West by-election continues to court controversy. Chief Executive Carrie Lam said today she backed the disqualification of pro-democracy candidate Lau Siu Lai. The reason? Her alleged support for self-determination, something Lau denies.
It
all boils down to whether the returning officer believes you. We can always change our political stance. But the important thing is whether the officers believe you when they make their decision. And their decision is based on the law and the facts presented to them.
Lau's exit yesterday kicked off a political storm. According to a 7-page report that was later sent to her, Lau's perceived unwillingness to accept China's sovereignty was among a list of reasons for her ban. It's the latest in a string of signals that officials are clamping down on independence advocacy and dissent. Today, Lam said she has zero tolerance for independence bids as they pose a challenge to the country's territorial integrity. Lau hit back, accusing authorities of warping her brand of politics to weed her out. Following the decision, the ousted candidate led a group of Democrats in protest against her exit last night. She said she was discussing her options with her team, including possibly fighting the ban in court. Although Lau had backed self-determination in the past, in her application for the by-election, she pledged support for one country, two systems. And while authorities said they noted this change in her platform, they couldn't accept it as being genuine. It's a decision that's prompted backlash from Lau's camp, which accused the government of denying people's right to stand for elections. The Labour Party's Lee Cheuk-yan, meanwhile, has thrown his hat into the ring as the pro-Democrats' backup candidate. Earlier this week, the veteran Democrat had warned that Lau's nomination could face some hurdles. Former journalist Rebecca Chan and Democrat lawmaker Frederick Fung have also declared their candidacy.
Well, joining us on our show today to talk more about Lau Siu Lai's disqualification is pan-democratic lawmaker Ted Hui. How do you feel about Lau Siu Lai's disqualification?
I think Lau Siu Lai's disqualification is absolutely outrageous, and I cannot believe it's happening in Hong Kong. It's a slap on the face towards Hong Kong people's basic rights and freedom. And it's also an obvious sign that Hong Kong is not free anymore when a respected person, a normal citizen, are banned from running in the public elections. So it's bluntly against human rights and international governance on civil and political rights. So I'm just really angry, just like normal Hong Kong people.
Are you confident that the pan-democratic camp can keep their Ledgeco seat with Lee Cheuk-yan running instead?
I cannot say I'm optimistic. It's very challenging after, taking away our best candidates from our camp in this election. It's an unfair game after all. So if we lose, we have nothing to say. But I believe the key is that Hong Kong people will see that this is symbolic of our basic rights and freedom. So if they see this point and still vote for, our second option, Lee Cheuk-yan, I believe that that's still a chance.
What are the implications if the pan-democrats lose this seat?
As I said, it's an unfair game after all. So I cannot draw, too far the implications, but I'm pretty sure, personally, that there will be a litigation, a judicial review case in the future. But before that,
That's your next step, litigation.
That's the next step, I believe. But of course, more importantly, we need to win the seat in the upcoming elections. That's not only a seat for Lau Siu-lai. It's not only a seat for the Pan-Democrats. I think it's symbolic of our basic rights and freedom, as I said. So I think that's more important, the significance. Mm-hmm.
So you will definitely go to court with this?
I guess not me, myself, but people from the Democrat side and perhaps Lau Siu-lai herself. I believe that she has some good grounds to go to court for judicial review because we can see from the explanation from the returning officer who banned Siu-lai that, all those grounds are quite barbaric, tracking all the records of what she said on Facebook and what she said from back 2 years ago. And basically just her political view and the acts that she's done. So are they good grounds for banning a candidate? I think it doesn't happen anywhere in any democracy in the world.
Thank you so much for coming on the program, Ted Hui. The chief executive defends her controversial Lantau development proposal again, saying Hong Kong must take action now over the land shortage crisis. Speaking on a radio show today, Lam said some people are conducting a smear campaign over the government's plans to boost land supply. She said such attempts won't benefit society. The CE said society should rationally discuss the quota of allowing up to 150 mainlanders to settle in Hong Kong each day, rather than resort to slander. This comes after critics say this quota is one reason behind Hong Kong's housing shortage. Meanwhile, the transport chief is defending Lam's other initiative, the tunnel toll changes. Chan said the plan is a negotiated outcome between the government and the Western Harbour Crossing Company and that it can't be changed. He denied threatening LegCo to accept the plan. Chan said it's the best proposal to ease traffic congestion.
We have done computer simulations for comparisons, and the best result is $50 for the Western Harbour Crossing, $40 for the Cross Harbour Tunnel, and East Harbour Crossing. This is the best way to ease traffic congestion. It doesn't make sense if we didn't give LegCo the best proposal we have.
The administration also promises to increase quotas of government-subsidized places in elderly homes. Welfare Chief Law Chi Kwong said the government will purchase 5,000 more top-tier places from private institutions in the next 5 years. He said authorities will also improve community care services, such as boosting elderly daycare units in qualified private care homes.
It's a big investment risk for these private care homes to spend money to improve their service quality. They are worried that they may not have that many customers. There is a low motivation for them to improve them. We are now encouraging them to get better, so the government will buy their places, and this guarantee part of their income.
Meanwhile, speaking at an education forum in North Point today, former financial chief John Tang had some harsh things to say about the city's education system.
Our present education system is based on the blueprint from the industrial era. That's a very long time ago. It's outdated, and it cannot prepare our students for the challenges ahead of them. They're not learning about the information and tools they need to deal with future problems.
Lion Rock Park, which is believed to be one of the sources of a dengue fever outbreak, has now reopened. The park was closed for 2 months to prevent the spread of the virus. Hikers were seen flooding in after staff opened the park gates this morning. Mosquito repellent was provided for them. 29 cases of dengue fever were reported between August and September. An investigation showed that a majority of the patients had visited the park in Wong Tai Sin. Coming up next, the latest from the world of business. Let's start with a look at how U.S. markets ended the week. Wall Street bounced back on Friday after a turbulent week that saw 6 days of straight losses. The Dow Jones climbed more than 1.1%. The S&P 500 gained over 1.4%. The Nasdaq jumped 2.3%. It comes after three of America's biggest lenders, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo, reported double-digit profit growth. America's banks are increasingly raking in the benefits of lower taxes and a growing U.S. economy. Despite the rally, though, all three benchmarks ended the week down with their worst weekly declines since March as trade tensions with China rise. Staying with U.S.-China trade tensions, U.S. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin, though, said Saturday he was not losing any sleep over the prospect that China could sell U.S. Treasury debt. At the IMF's meeting in Bali, he also said Chinese officials told him it's not in China's interest to lower the yuan. His remarks come after new data out Friday shows China's exports unexpectedly accelerated in September, producing a record surplus with the U.S. And that could exacerbate their dispute further, as Thuy Ong reports.
China's trade spat with the US might become more heated. The country has reported a $34.1 billion record trade surplus with the US, with September exports rising 14.5% from a year earlier, the fastest pace since February. Analysts say US tariffs aren't biting yet, though that's unlikely to be sustained.
China is looking to also perhaps divert some of the exports that it directed before to the US to other countries, and there is concern about possible dumping that may take place and what it will mean for competitors for the goods that they were until now selling to the US.
The yuan has depreciated about 6% against the dollar so far this year, taking the sting out of the tariffs imposed on $250 billion of exports to the US. Despite some concerns, US Treasury staff haven't recommended labelling China as a currency manipulator.
Of course, what Trump will say is that there is currency manipulation going on. I'm pretty certain that's probably what it's going to come out with. And of course, he'll say that that's another reason why he should perhaps extend tariffs to the rest of Chinese exports to the US.
In an interview with Fox, Trump threatened just that, saying there's much more he could do to hurt China's economy further.
Also on Friday, ratings agency Moody's warned tensions between the world's two biggest economies will have unintended consequences for US companies. In a new report, Moody's said American furniture, home goods and electronics retailers could be hit by the US-China trade spat. It added that shifting production chains will be costly, while growing uncertainty will slow investment. It says the greatest disruption will be felt in Asia, a key player in global supply chains. The Trump administration slapped tariffs of up to 25% on about $250 billion worth of Chinese goods recently, sparking retaliatory duties from China. Time for a break now, but there's plenty more to come when we return. The death toll from one of the most powerful storms in U.S. history rises to at least 18. Rescue and recovery teams, meanwhile, continue to comb through the vast areas destroyed by Hurricane Michael.
Infinite Visions. View TV 6. World number 6, Alina Svitolina. 2017 Roland Garros winner, Yelena Ostapenko. Go head-to-head with some of the world's top players in the city that never sleeps. Prudential presents Prudential Hong Kong Tennis Open 2018 Final. Tomorrow at 4 p.m. Live on Channel 99 View TV.
Take a trip to the land down under. Behind every native animal surviving in the wild.
Can we talk about this?
Or the furry babies living in different households.
This is a massive open gash. I don't think at positioning it's too bad.
There's a dedicated veterinary team.
That's just such a good result.
Because animal lives matter.
Look after my girl.
Thank you so much.
Bondi Vet. Tonight at 8 on View TV 6. The hottest local news, trending international stories, weekly review, topics that affect our communities, in-depth analyses and opinions. All that you need is in one place. Weekly Review. Sunday night at 7:30 on View TV 6. No food.
I need some food.
No shelter.
I have to build up my shelter.
No fresh water.
There we go. I need this.
No tools.
This I can make use of.
No camera crew.
There's just not enough to gather here. There's not enough to hunt.
Just one man alone in the wilderness, surviving. Survivor Man. Wednesday night at 8:30 on View TV 6.
Welcome back. Fears are growing for a missing group of climbers after a violent snowstorm destroyed their camp on a Himalayan peak in western Nepal. Tourism officials said a 5-member South Korean expedition team and 4 Nepali guides were at the base camp of Mount Gorja when a storm struck. The camp was destroyed. To the US, and the death toll from Hurricane Michael has risen to at least 18 and is expected to climb even further. Rescue teams used heavy equipment and drones to hunt for hundreds of people unaccounted for in devastated communities across the Florida Panhandle. The storm smashed into the state's northwest coast near Mexico Beach, packing winds of up to 250 kilometers an hour. More than 940,000 homes and businesses on the US East Coast are without power. Well, the disappearance of Saudi journalist Jamal Khashoggi could have economic implications for Saudi Arabia. Richard Branson's Virgin Galactic is among the businesses to suspend or cancel Saudi projects after Jamal Khashoggi went missing. Julian Satterthwaite reports.
Fire. The fallout from the disappearance of a Saudi journalist could reach space. Richard Branson saying Friday he's halting talks over Saudi investment in his Virgin Galactic venture. Riyadh had been expected to put up to $1 billion into the space tourism project. But the mysterious case of Jamal Khashoggi may have put paid to that. The dissident Saudi journalist vanished after visiting the country's consulate in Turkey. The Washington Post says Turkey has told the US it has recordings proving he was killed in the building. Now the case threatens to have economic consequences for Saudi Arabia that go far beyond Branson. Reputational damage for sure, a string of top names pulling out of a big conference slated for later this month. Among them Uber chief executive Dara Khosrowshahi and Viacom boss Bob Bakish. Journalists also quitting the so-called Davos in the desert following Khashoggi's disappearance. Big money and big projects at stake too. This will one day be Neom, a megacity that Saudi leader Mohammed bin Salman wants to build with foreign backers. On Wednesday, former US Energy Secretary Ernest Moniz said he was suspending his role on Neom's board. A US firm advising on the project also pulling out. Even more worried may be the world's big arms makers. So far, Donald Trump says there is no plan to ban sales to Riyadh, but Congress could think otherwise. If arms sales are banned, that would be a huge blow to defense giants like Boeing. The Saudis last year confirmed plans to spend $110 billion on US military equipment.
The evangelical pastor at the heart of the rapidly deteriorating relationship between the United States and Turkey has been released by a Turkish court after being held in the country for 2 years. Emily Wither was outside the court in Izmir.
US Pastor Andrew Brunson is on his way home, taking off from the Turkish city of Izmir after 2 years in detention on allegations of terrorism. US President Donald Trump tweeting, "Pastor Brunson just released, will be home soon." Perhaps Turkey's most expensive prisoner, Brunson became the center of a diplomatic crisis between Turkey and the US that led to economic pain for Turkey. It saw the country's lira tumbling to a record low and global markets scrambling to deal with the fallout.
We heard from witnesses today inside the court that said their previous testimonies had been misrepresented and that they were inaccurate. Brunson, listening to some of those testimonies, remarked at one point, "I don't see how any of this is related to me." And just before that decision was handed down, he said that he was an innocent man, that he loved Jesus, but also that he loved Turkey. Pastor Brunson may originally have been from North Carolina, but he's lived in Turkey now for over 20 years, and he will probably have to now leave his home here for good. Just as he was told that he would be able to go free, he broke down into tears. His wife came up to the low partition and they hugged.
Brunson's release will likely score points with US evangelical Christians, a big part of Trump's base and potentially important with the November elections coming. And while this decision is a first step to easing tensions between two NATO allies, attention may now turn to the fate of other US nationals, including local employees of the US consulate, also in detention.
Time for sports. Tennis first, and teenage sensation Diana Yastremska has her eye on her first WTA title after beating Zhang Shuai in the semi-finals of the Hong Kong Tennis Open. Yastremska didn't have the best start, trailing behind 2-5 in the opener, but she fought back to take 5 games in a row. The 18-year-old went on to take the second set, finishing the match 7-5, 6-4. The final is tomorrow. Football now. The international break may mean Jose Mourinho is enjoying a little bit of time out of the spotlight, but that is soon to change as domestic football restarts next weekend. Despite United's stunning 3-2 comeback win in their last match against Newcastle, British football journalist Tom Hopkinson thinks Mourinho's future is still uncertain, but he thinks not all the problems at Manchester United are the manager's fault.
I still think that by the end of the season it wouldn't surprise me if we were to see him leave. I think short term it changes things. I think that there was, as I say, a groundswell of opinion that had he lost to Newcastle, had Manchester United lost to Newcastle, a club, let's not forget, who are really struggling in the Premier League this season, then he would have been sacked, whether it was at the weekend or whether it was in the days that followed. I think it was really that close. Whether Mourinho is that bothered about that at the moment, I don't know. He's certainly giving off the air of a man who isn't particularly happy in his job. So short term, I think, yes, it's probably given him a stay of execution, but I think long term, when you sum up everything that's been going on, everything that's been said between every party involved at Manchester United, then the long-term outlook is pretty bleak for them.
Van Gaal's failed, Mourinho's failed, Moyes has failed. Is it higher than the manager? Is it a failure at board level?
I think this is the big issue for a lot of fans now who do see it as a failure at board level. Jurgen Klopp has built his Liverpool side over the last 3 years, and I have to say he's done an incredible job in doing that. And Manchester United have gone about their approach in a completely different way. And at the moment, it just isn't working for them. They're not playing the kind of football that they're seeing Manchester City and Liverpool playing, and they're not winning the trophies that they used to win. So Ed Woodward needs to take a long, hard look at the approach. The Glazers need to take a long, hard look at whether Ed Woodward is the right man, I think, as well. And of course, everyone in that hierarchy at Manchester United now needs to decide whether they are going to back the manager or whether it's time to sack him, whether it's now or whether it's at the end of the season, and then move on.
Meanwhile, Olympic sprint champion Usain Bolt scored 2 goals in his first start for the Central Coast Mariners in a trial match. The 32-year-old is hoping to win a contract ahead of the Mariners' 2018 to 2019 A-League campaign. He scored his first in the 57th minute when he shrugged off a defender on the left before unleashing a hard, low shot past the goalkeeper at the near post. Bolt's last appearance for the first team was against an amateur select side in August, where he came on as a late substitute and appeared to lack match sharpness.
It was brilliant, you know. I mean, it takes all the weight off your shoulders, you know. I mean, that first goal to relax you, because I'd missed one earlier, which I wasn't happy with myself. But when scoring, it was just a great feeling. I was happy about it, and it took a weight off my shoulders.
There you go, more than just a sprinter. That's it for now. Join us again at 11:30 p.m. for an update on all the stories shaping your world. I'm Grace Brown, and this is View TV News. Happy Saturday.
Coming up next, The Paleo Way Season 1.
We Enrage.